Welcome back to Citizen Concern, where we remind you to beware of the comrades. Please subscribe, like this video, share this video, and follow if you have not already. So South Africa's very own Julius Malema was in Ghana a few days ago, and there he decided to feed rubbish to the people of Ghana. It's not new rubbish, it's the same old recycled rubbish. Have a look.
Prior to European arrival, Ghana was home to powerful empires like the mighty Ashanti, renowned for their gold trade and military prowess.
Yes, what else were they known for in the Ashanti Empire? Tell us, Julius, don't leave out anything. Tell us what the Ashanti Empire was known for. You know he's not going to say it, right? These Pan-Africanists never say it. Anyway, he goes on.
These societies had complex social structures, sophisticated cultural traditions, and well-developed trade networks.
He is refusing to say it. And that's because these kinds of people, these Pan-Africanists, don't want to acknowledge the vital truths of African history that do not match their interests. The truth is, the Ashanti Empire was one of the most powerful African empires, just like Julius Malema said. The first thing to note here is the word empire. By admitting that Africa was home to powerful empires, he is admitting that Africa was never one, exposing his previous lie that Africa was one and was divided by Europeans. Africa has always been ruled by empires, kingdoms. Those empires and kingdoms had a habit of oppressing other states or other kingdoms. In the case of the Ashanti Empire, Julius Malema has just left out some vital information. That information is that the Ashanti Empire, which is present-day Ghana, was not only big on gold trading, it was also extremely big on trading its fellow Africans to Europeans. That's right, Ghana, home of the ancient Ashanti Empire, is one of the African empires that required that smaller states under its rule pay tribute in the form of slaves. Julius Malema left this part out on purpose because he knows that the message won't go down as well if he included it. But we can't seek to make progress as Africa by telling each other things that make us feel good about ourselves and refrain from telling each other other parts of truth, uncomfortable truths. Yes, the truth does hurt, but if we allow it, it also sets us free from all this deception. The Ashanti Empire was so powerful, just like Malema said. They were renowned for their military prowess, but do you know why they were so powerful? It's because they traded their fellow African brothers and sisters as slaves in exchange for guns. I know it's not a convenient fact, but it's a fact nonetheless. Why do we pick facts that tell an ideal story about us? Why do we leave out parts of the story that show our weaknesses? Yet when we tell stories about other nations, we choose to highlight their weaknesses and hide their strengths. As inconvenient and not ideal as it is for your narrative, the Ashanti Empire was a big seller of Africans to Europeans. And Ghana is not the only country that did this. Nigeria did it too. Within Ghana itself was another state called the Bono State, which also practiced slave trade. The same kingdoms, like I've said several times before, had a habit of practicing human sacrifice. They sacrificed their own African brothers and sisters. In all these things, Europeans had nothing to do with this. Even now, Africans are still practicing voodoo killings. Where? Here in South Africa it's happening, in Nigeria, in Ghana, they're also big on those kinds of things too. Africans are being used as puppets by people like Malema to focus on the wrong things. Julius Malema, stop making Africans believe in the silly idea that they are simply victims of Europeans. Africans are not just victims who were helpless. That false narrative doesn't make us stronger. It doesn't empower us as Africans. It only makes us hate Europeans, look down on ourselves, and feel disempowered to do and be as great as the Europeans, while we have the potential to be that great. Let's focus on creating mindsets of improving ourselves and reaching our fullest capacity. Use your influence to encourage people to seek to do and be their best. Western countries are governed by different people, just like African countries are governed by different people. Sometimes those people who oversee the Western countries or the African countries can be good leaders, and sometimes they can be bad leaders. Right here in Africa, the Zimbabwean government massacred the Ndebele people in order to hold on to power. What have the African leaders said to address that?
It's only recently that people have begun to speak openly about what happened over 15 years ago.
Kuthe kusuka khonapho kwathe kuthiwa sebegepile khonapho kwathe kuthiwa bengeniswa khonapho bengeniswa kuthiwa ngenani linjalo khonapho kuthe kunjalo babe dutyulwa belokho benjalo khonapho khonapho yikho kuthe beqeda khonapho kwathe kuthiwa gqibelanini sase sigqibela ngezandla phangisanini masiyane sagqibela
wakhupha isithupha wakhupha iwatshi wangiqhubile wangena kodwa
phongo ukubulawa kodwa singakwazi ukuthi kwenzelwane.
Lapha kwagcwala igodi ngabe lathi sangena phakathi egodini kwasuka kwagcwala igodi.
Kodwa sithi phambili ngo-RG Robert Mugabe phansi ngama-distance
Bathe bekwanile kwase sisukunyiswa laphana kwathiwa sizegqibela sabuya sazagqibela sagada phezulu sihlatsheliswa.
Siyazazi ingoma zabo ukuthi hayi wathi konde di sizazi uthi konde di qakeza hayi wathi konde di hayi wa hlabelani kakhulu hayi wathi konde di hayi wathi konde di shaye khona phambi kwakho.
These three came from an area called Cholocho. They say soldiers came to their village in 1983 looking for dissidents.
It's difficult to talk about what happened. They killed my husband, then they beat and raped me. It's very painful.
The Gukuraundi massacres and other atrocities tore apart families. Some people still don't know where their loved ones are buried.
An early victim of European interests, the European presence in Ghana began with the Portuguese explorers who arrived in the 15th century, and from then till the 19th century, Ghana, then known as the Gold Coast, became a major source of enslaved people for the transatlantic trade.
Yes, the Gold Coast became a major source of slaves, but those slaves were caught and supplied by fellow Africans. Ghanaians, slave sellers who plundered African villages for their own gain.
European powers established ports and trading ports along the coast, exchanging manufactured goods for enslaved Africans captured primarily from the interior regions.
Yes, guys, they did establish trading ports, but who was the major supplier of the slaves? The people in the same room as yourself right now are descendants of the slave sellers. Are you going to ask for reparations from them?
The forced removal of millions of people had a profound demographic and social impact on Ghana. It weakened communities, fueled interstate conflict, and led to cultural loss.
What a load of hogwash. You can tell someone just went and copied and pasted these lines from the EFF sources of propaganda and disinformation. I'll keep on repeating this for all EFF supporters who believe these lies. Who was removing the people from their communities? Who sold the slaves to the Europeans? Europeans did not come here to catch the slaves for themselves. African brothers and sisters did it back then, and some are doing it even now.
This is Ghana, West Africa. When I was 7, I was brought to this country and forced into a system I knew nothing about. This is me. I was held as a slave in a religious shrine.
What crime is this child paying for?
Her uncle committed adultery.
Thousands of women across West Africa have lost their freedom because of a practice called chokoshi. Chokoshi is illegal and it's not often talked about in Accra. But to my surprise, Richard tells me his own grandmother is living as a Chokoshi. This same system robbed me of my childhood. I didn't even understand the language. They took away my clothes and wrapped me in a purple cloth. They even took away my name.
How old is this little girl? 7 years old. Do you know why you're here?
In 1997, I was filmed by an American news crew at the place I was being held. A shrine run by a priest dedicated to the worship of deities. I was labeled a Chokoshi, a wife of the gods, paying for a crime committed by a family member. But this report changed everything. With the help of a charity called International Needs, an American viewer flew to Ghana to negotiate my release. His name was Kenneth Parini, and he will become my adoptive father. He took me to the US, where I spent the next 13 years. I was relieved to be out after about a year in the shrine.
Les chaînes, c'est pour les captifs. Les chaînes, c'est pour l'esclave qui vient de devenir esclave. Mais l'esclave descendant de plusieurs générations, il est esclave même dans sa tête. Et il est totalement soumis. Et c'est malheureusement ce genre d'esclavage que nous avons aujourd'hui. Celui dont rêvait le planteur américain.
Mauritania, in 1981, became the last country in the world to abolish slavery. There was no punishment for slave owners until 2007. The UN says 10 to 20% of Mauritanians live in slavery today. We traveled to the country on the western fringe of the Sahara to see for ourselves. We would meet people who never knew freedom, people who escaped to find their lives hadn't changed, and abolitionists who have been fighting against slavery for years with minimal results. The government is keeping a close eye on her to stop her from telling her story.
يبطنا مسرحنا بايقة من الحيوان البقار والغنم والبن ومضاد السراحة ما من نجي نعود مطيشين شي من والله شي تريف يخبط فوقنا التعمر ويبطنا البط الشديد وباني بنا كاملين شاكين كان يبطني بعد يبطوني كاملين يبطونا بالعمد وبالدبابيس وندوروا فيهم حقنا كامله وظن كترك لا تركتهم ولا مخالدين لا تركته ولا لكن مخالدين ديك الساعة معاهم ما نعرف شيء ساعتين معاهم ما نعرف شيء لا عن ماما هي بس يعني عاد يبطوني بطن متين وكل شيء عاد يعطوا عن ماما هي كانوا ما يبطوني للبطن متين لا هلا عاد معي خاسر لين خلق قتلوه هاي الراجل كنا يسامع عربنا كتبوا بالحالة شنو لين عاد كيف لكن هاي خلي بيبي هاي مسوي قروته عاد يهزوني فيه يهزوني فيه قتلوه يخلق بيبي قتلوه.
While SOS Slaves was able to reunite Mulher with her children, others are forced to leave their families behind.
مثلا الآن حاول سفن كان قد نمشي بها السيفة تعود ضامنة ما اللي جاتني وتل السناطرة أنا ما مشيت معكم انتم مدينة ضمنتوني ما تردوني ضرب منين تعودوا لهم تردين ولا اللي تردوني أنا أختاركم تخبطوني بعمارة وتردموني عن نرجع نتخمم بها بعد اللي ما قدنا ساعة اللي مزارة أخوتي لي مزارة أخواتي لي ما قدنا ساعة ما قدنا ساعة حد اللي كانوا من الإعدام ما قدنا ساعة.
In our modern life, people like President Cyril Ramaphosa, Jacob Zuma, Julius Malema have sold out their African country for Gucci's, Range Rovers, BMWs, Swiss watches. These sellouts are living among us. They were there among the Ashanti Empire, and they are there even now.
The transatlantic slave trade left a deep and enduring mark on Ghana's collective memory.
Julius, maybe you're not clear. Understand this. The Ashanti Empire was just like the other Western African and Northern African states and empires that raided slaves to sell to Europeans. These people did not lose large numbers of their own people to slaves. They raided other smaller kingdoms. Don't go to Ghana and start pitting Ghanaians when they are the ones who were catching slaves from other African states. This is why no one should listen to you. You clearly don't go and do your research about what you're saying before you say it, or you know it all and you choose what to say and what to be quiet about. The Ashanti Empire, Oyo Empire, and many others did not suffer due to the slave trade. They prospered due to it because they were the sellers of African slaves to Europeans. Julius Malema, just like the rest of the Pan-African movement that subscribed to his silly ideas, is a racist man. He simply hates white people, or wants us to believe that he hates them so that his supporters are more willing to hate white people. Just like the ANC and just like the majority of socialists in Africa, he will never speak about the effect that the Arab slave trade had on Africa. To make matters worse, it is highly likely that some of the slaves sold to America were from the Arab slave trade, but he won't mention it. It is a fact that Arabs enslaved people from Central Africa to Southern Africa, but Julius won't say a thing about it. Why? Ask these people what caused the end of slavery in Ghana, and they don't know. Most of them don't anyway. It's very easy to point to the weakness of other people. It's very easy when you don't want to acknowledge that Africa was a terrible place with a lot of suffering way before colonial powers came here. But just because you hate whites, it seems okay to say what you're saying. Ashanti Empire was an empire, which means it also had colonies right here in Africa, the same as the Oyo Empire and many others. But these leftists act like imperialism is a Western ideology brought on by Britain and America. Lies, lies, lies. If you keep supporting people like Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Malema, Robert Mugabe and the likes, Africa will forever remain poor and very hostile towards people that may be trying to help. Learn your history, and before you type a negative comment, do a quick Google search to confirm who is telling the truth here. Let's rise above responding based on emotions and feelings, and let's base it on facts and evidence, shall we? It will get us further, faster. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Katlego Moagi. This is Citizen Concerned, and now more than ever, beware of the comrades.